Hi, I'm Olivia, 32 years old, and I've been married to my husband Mason for a year. We met at a friend's party, hit it off, started dating like any other couple, and eventually got married. Neither of us is getting any younger, and while Mason isn't the most exciting guy, he made me feel calm and at peace. I thought we'd grow old together. We both worked, so we're financially stable, and I handle most of the housework since Mason rarely helps out. He's usually either relaxing at home or heading out early, not spending much time with me. I didn't mind too much because this was how I grew up seeing my parents live, and I accepted it as normal. One evening, Mason came home late, probably from drinking with co-workers or friends. I greeted him, saying, "You're home late. Dinner's still there if you're hungry, but it's pretty late, so I guess not." He didn't respond, just turned around and walked into the living room without saying a word. I sighed, thinking, here we go again. Whenever Mason's upset, he goes quiet. I figured something at work or during his night out had annoyed him, so I left him alone and went to bed, assuming he'd be back to his usual self in the morning. The next day, while I was making breakfast, Mason walked into the kitchen. I greeted him cheerfully with, "Good morning." He glanced at me, grabbed some milk from the fridge, and left without saying a word. His cold attitude surprised me. It wasn't like him. I thought, wow, he's really in a mood. Still, I didn't press him and just focused on packing our lunches, but to my surprise, things didn't return to normal like they usually did. Mason stayed distant the next evening, and the silence continued for days. I became really worried. Weeks went by, and Mason still wouldn't talk to me. I tried texting him and even left him little notes, but he ignored everything. However, he did eat the meals I made, so I knew he was at least paying attention to that. Hoping to get a reaction, I left a note in his lunch bag, thinking he might say something after finding it, but still nothing. Before I knew it, over a month of this silence had passed. I felt so helpless, like I'd tried everything. One evening, I decided to do something drastic. I didn't make dinner every day. I'd always prepare dinner after work, but this time, I wanted to see how Mason would react if I didn't. When he came home, I pretended to watch TV in the living room. He walked in and looked at the dining table, where dinner would usually be waiting, but it was empty. He glanced at me, but instead of saying anything, he turned and walked out the front door, slamming it behind him. I was stunned. Why was he ignoring me like this? I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. Feeling defeated, I sat there alone on the couch. The next morning, Mason was already gone. When I woke up, curious, I checked the living room table and found a note. When I read it, my eyes went wide. It said, "Stop skipping your wifely duties," written hastily in messy handwriting. Something inside me snapped. That was it was done. Why did I have to keep trying so hard to please Mason when he was treating me like this? We were never overly affectionate, but this was just unacceptable. I grabbed a pen and wrote my own note next to his. "I'm going back to my parents' house." Then I packed my things and left. When I arrived at my parents' house, they were surprised to see me, but once I explained how Mason had been ignoring me for over a month for no reason, they understood and welcomed me with open arms. It felt so good to be somewhere I could have a normal conversation. For now, I've decided to stay with my parents and see how Mason reacts to this. After leaving Mason and staying with my parents, I didn't hear from him at all. No calls, no messages, not even a visit to my parents' house. I figured he thought I was just trying to make a point and that ignoring me would make me come back. Fine, let's see how long he could keep this up. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Before I knew it, 6 months had passed. By that point, I had almost forgotten about Mason altogether. One day, as I was heading out to do some shopping, there he was standing outside my parents' house with a defiant and angry look on his face. I frowned, shocked to see him. Mason didn't say a word. He just glared at me. Then, without warning, he tried to walk into my parents' house. "Whoa, hold on," I said, blocking his way. Mason stopped and looked at me, clearly frustrated but still silent. I warned him, "Don't just walk in, or I'll call the police." Finally, After all those months of silence, Mason spoke. With a smirk, he said, "Look at you, acting all tough just because you're at your parents' house. Don't get ahead of yourself." I remember Mason being a little rough around the edges, but not this bad. While I was lost in thought, he suddenly erupted. "What the hell are you thinking? You've been gone for 6 months, just enjoying yourself here. Get a grip." Then, as if he was being generous, he spread his arms and said, "Look, I'll let this slide. Just come back home. I'm willing to forgive you." His condescending tone made my blood boil. I replied calmly, "I think you're confused. You and I are strangers now." Mason's face turned red with rage. "What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? We're married. Stop this nonsense and pack your bags." His shouting only fueled my anger. He talked as if he was doing me a favor by forgiving me as if I was the one in the wrong. It was infuriating. He clearly had no idea what had happened in the past 6 months. I finally snapped, "Listen, Mason, I've already received divorce papers from your mother. I signed them and filed them with the court. We're not married anymore. Got it? We're strangers, total strangers." I emphasized the word strangers, and Mason's face went pale. He looked genuinely shocked, as if the reality of the situation had just hit him. About a month after I moved back to my parents' house, my ex-mother-in-law, Helen, asked to meet me at a cafe nearby. We had never been close, so it was a bit surprising. After a brief exchange of polite greetings, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "Open it. Even you will understand," she said with a sharp tone. I opened the envelope and pulled out a document. It was a divorce petition, already signed and stamped by Mason. Shocked, I looked at Helen, who was glaring at me with the same disdainful look Mason often had. "Is this Mason's idea?" I asked her. "Did he say anything about this to you?" Helen let out a dramatic sigh before answering. "Oh yes, he had plenty to say. Want to hear it?" "Yes, please," I replied, keeping my composure. Helen then went on to share what Mason had been telling her. According to him, I was a useless and lazy wife who stopped doing any housework after we got married. He claimed I quit my job, lounged around the house all day, and always ran back to my parents whenever things didn't go my way, acting like a spoiled child. Helen's piercing gaze stayed fixed on me the entire time, and it was obvious she believed every word of his lies. I realized there was no point in arguing with her. When she finished, she smugly asked, "So, what are you going to do now?" Not that I want to meddle, but you've been pretty awful, you know. I smiled and replied calmly, "If Mason wants a divorce, then that's what he'll get." Helen glared at me one last time, slapped some money on the table to pay for her coffee, and stormed out of the cafe. I returned home that same day, signed the divorce papers, and submitted them to the court the very next day. Later, when Mason found out, his face turned pale with shock. It was clear Helen hadn't informed him about what she had done. But honestly, I didn't care. I had trusted Helen to deliver the papers, and now everything was settled. When I finished explaining my side of things, Mason suddenly panicked and blurted out, "No, you've got it all wrong. I only filled out those divorce papers to keep my mom off my back. I never intended to submit them their invalid." He sounded confused and desperate, rambling on. "And anyway, you'd be the one to suffer if we got divorced, so let's go to the court right now and get it withdrawn." I stared at him coldly and tilted my head. Why would it be a problem for me if we divorced? Mason's face lit up with a smug grin, as if he just outsmarted me. "Think about it your age. With a divorce on your record, no one will want you. That's why I'm saying I'll take you back. I'm doing this for your benefit. You should be thanking me." I couldn't help but roll my eyes at how arrogant and delusional he sounded. "Listen, Mason, divorces don't just disappear. And for your information, I'm already married to someone else." His jaw dropped, and he stood there in disbelief. "What? Really? Do you want me to repeat myself? I'm married to someone else," I said firmly. Mason suddenly began ranting. "That's a lie. You're just making that up to get me to leave. You're trying to make a fool out of me, aren't you?" At that moment, a voice came from behind me. I turned to see a man stepping out of my parents' house. He glanced at both Mason and me, looking puzzled. Mason frowned, surprised by the appearance of this stranger. The man looked at me and asked, "Is everything okay?" Feeling a bit awkward, I smiled and said, "Mason, this is my husband, Noah." Noah gave Mason a polite but skeptical nod, overwhelmed by Noah's towering presence. He used to be a professional rugby player. After all, Mason took a step back. In a sudden scramble to save face, Mason started babbling. No, you've got it all wrong. My old boss told me I should, handle things like this when things go bad in a marriage. And guess what? His wife dumped him, and his kids don't talk to him anymore. What a fool. Right, I was just following his advice. I didn't mean anything by it. You get that, right? Mason's excuses were pathetic, and I didn't even bother responding. It was clear he was grasping at straws. I stared at Mason with disgust, fed up with his pathetic excuses. He looked confused, probably because he didn't expect me to react like that. Then Noah stepped in. "Sorry, but you need to leave right now and never come back here. If you approach Olivia again, I'll call the police." With that, Noah firmly pushed Mason out of the doorway. Intimidated by Noah's calm but strong presence, Mason quickly fled. Even after Mason left, Noah and I stayed cautious, worried he might try something irrational out of spite. But as days turned into weeks, we never heard from him again. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I reached out to a mutual friend to ask about Mason. We started with casual conversation, but when I brought up Mason, our friend let out a sigh and filled me in. It turns out Mason quit his job just a few days after showing up at my parents' house. The reason? Mason had always sided with his boss, someone he trusted, even when the boss harassed employees at work. When this behavior came to light, it caused a major scandal at the company. The boss was resigned basically. He was demoted to some remote, far-off location. Mason was expected to be transferred as well, but he quit out of pride. According to our friend, Mason hasn't found a new job since. His arrogance has gotten in the way. He refuses to attend interviews, even when recruiters offer opportunities. When Mason's mother heard he quit his job, she disowned him. She's known for her extreme personality, so it wasn't entirely surprising. Our friend concluded with a sad update. Mason blames everything on his old manager. He spends most of his time drowning in self-pity and drinking. At this rate, who knows what will happen to him? Hearing all of this, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and pity. Mason had brought this on himself, but it was still a sad ending to what could have been a better life for him. If he keeps going like this, he'll ruin his health before he finds another job. It's a mess. I hope he meets someone new, though that seems unlikely, our friend said. We both chuckled before ending the call. As for me, Mason's troubles are far behind me, and I'm now enjoying a peaceful life with Noah. Interestingly, Noah was my colleague before. When he heard about my divorce, he didn't waste any time showing his interest. We started dating about 6 months after my divorce. At first, I was hesitant because everything felt so fast, but Noah's confidence and kind personality quickly won me over. After we got married, Noah confessed that he had always had a crush on me and was heartbroken when I married Mason. I laughed and apologized for not noticing his feelings sooner. Now, Noah is a wonderful partner who helps me with chores I used to handle alone. Every time we eat together, he compliments my cooking with a smile, which makes me feel so appreciated. These small, everyday moments bring me so much happiness, something I hadn't realized I was missing before. Looking back, I think I was too used to growing up in a strict, old-fashioned household to understand what a healthy, joyful relationship could feel like. But now, my life with Noah feels full of light and love. I'm confident that, with him by my side, I'll have a happy and fulfilling life all the way into our golden years.